All right, we have nothing planned. Claire's making me do this. She just wanted to jump in and talk about ADHD relationships.
And Tom says there's a difference between being spontaneous and authentic and unplanned, but I don't agree.
I guess we'll find out. So I hope you do get something from this conversation.
I know I will.
Yeah, well, there we go. At least we'll get something from the conversation. We do know like 10% of the population has ADHD, undiagnosed, diagnosed, self-diagnosed, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know 100% of them have relationships with people. But that's what we want to talk about, right? Is relationships.
Yes.
Because we talk a lot about how difficult it can be and what those difficulties are.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think all relationships have problems. And if they don't have a problem, I think that's a problem. Because if you never fight or you never have a disagreement, one person is subjugating themselves. One person's needs are not being met. Because there's always going to be conflict in relationships. Two people have needs that don't always match.
Right. Or you don't know what they are. And so you have to find out by sometimes rubbing up against them and
Yes,
realizing you didn't meet certain
right.
expectations or needs.
Fair enough.
We've had that conversation amongst ourselves.
Indeed.
Yeah. So you have lots of clients and you talk about it in that way. And so, you know, you've probably seen so much of this stuff from people. What are, other than the typical, you know, like having a messy room, you know, one person has a messy room, the other partner doesn't like it, or leaving cupboard doors open, or things like that. But those are all the kind of the easy surface kind of level stuff. But what's the more meaty stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I think that certainly with ADHD, but really a lot of couples, the one person being messier than the other, it's kind of low-hanging fruit in the relationship world, right? It's lots of issues, and hiring a cleaner often helps that. But I think there are some things that hiring a cleaner won't solve. Something that I hear a lot from clients, and I kind of get it myself, is we get excited with ADHD. You know what, if you have it, you get excited and you start something new, and you might get 80% of the way there, and then you feel like you're done. And it may be that you really are done and it's finished, or you're just done because it's not exciting and shiny and new anymore, so it's boring. Or
your partner looks at that and like, this looks like you start things and never finish.
Totally.
Right.
So you might not ever finish it because you're bored of it and don't want to do it. You might not finish it because you don't know how to finish it, or maybe your perfectionism, like in my case, gets in there and you don't want to finish it because it might not be good enough. Like, there's lots of reasons we don't finish, but I think what's different about the ADHD couple, a couple that where one or both people have ADHD, is we start lots and lots of things that we maybe don't finish.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's less concerning for the ADHD person when that happens, and more maybe for the partner. Maybe they don't understand why. Yeah. And maybe then they start to get critical. You always said that you were going to finish that gutter that we just talked about, fixing the gutter, which I have not done yet, although I did say I would do it. I also don't think it's a priority, which I think is another piece to ADHD relationships, which is...
I noticed I was changing the subject.
I am changing the subject, yeah. Yeah, but starting a project is maybe more concerning for the other person.
So the other person wants it done, and
wants it done, or they wonder why their partner keeps starting things and never finishes, and maybe there's like project stuff left all over the house, but it's started and not finished.
I hear that it's a concern. So the mess, the piles, I think the expense. So if someone is spending money on a hobby or craft or a project of one way or another, I actually think that is a source of stress for couples, is the money that goes into some of these unfinished projects. Mm-hmm. Could be that it's interfering kind of with quality of life. I had one client talk about a project in the backyard that was unfinished, and now the backyard is less usable as a result.
And that'd be frustrating, for the family. They have kids, it sounds like. Yeah.
And so it kind of feels like a legitimate concern on the part of the spouse. Yeah. But I do think if you have one person with ADHD in a relationship and the other person maybe doesn't have it in any family member, they don't know a lot about ADHD, there would be a lack of understanding of that novelty seeking part, and it might seem like it's sort of a choice. Like you could just finish it if you tried. Most of us have heard that before. And I don't know if that's true. Like sometimes it's really hard to finish something that is no longer rewarding. And I know it sounds like we're just like, oh, we only want to do things that are fun. And I guess it could look like that, but it doesn't feel like that. Like it's not just not fun, it's painful. And so I get it when people tell me, you know, I've got all these crafts and I look at them and they just make me feel terrible. Like the craft table is a common one. A lot of clients will be like, I really got into making jewelry, and then I got into painting, and then I got into knitting.
Totally.
And then they drop them all.
Yeah, but you learn a lot along the way. And I know that's something that...
Or not. Or they just buy all the stuff and don't even get started. Like the buying is the exciting part. And then it all arrives. Someone told me that she routinely would buy like 3 backpacks for each child because she either forgot that she'd already ordered them or she just couldn't choose. And she's like, well, that one's better and that one's better. So like all this stuff. But then she couldn't be bothered to return them. So she had like 20 backpacks.
Well, returning is no fun.
Returning is no fun.
Although I feel like reframing that and saying like returning might not be fun part, but seeing money come back into your credit card would be fun.
You'd think, but
no.
She's got 20 backpacks. So I'm just surprised at some of the ways that the impulsivity and the novelty seeking play out in people's lives. And online shopping has not helped this problem. That's for sure.
And so back to the relationship piece. So it seems like, at least when I talk to people, the relationship side is usually the ADHD person's coming to talk to me and asking about, you know, what we do or what can they do and all that. And it almost seems like, again, it's if they're in partnership, there's things that both sides need to do. Because it's like either they fall into that overfunctioning, underfunctioning, or, you know, sadly, I feel it's more shaming when someone says it's a parent-child relationship and it's 2 adults. I don't like that.
I don't like it either.
But anyways, the overfunctioning, underfunctioning. And you had an interesting take on that because when I talk to people, I usually talk about that and then they get it or they understand or they see that in their relationship or in their parents' relationship. But you were talking about it in a different way because how men might be in the relationship is different than how a woman might be in the relationship. And maybe you want to explain a little bit of that.
So if the man has ADHD and it's a heterosexual relationship, the female partner very often will start to overfunction. And so maybe this is kind of cultural and gendered expectations of how women should act. I'm not sure. But it's very common that I will hear a male client either say, my wife says she has like 3 children, but they actually only have 2 children. Or, you know, I end up speaking to the wife and she's like, I just, you know, I feel like I have an extra child. And I think because maybe parenting is already happening and there's lots of parenting activities that are to support executive functioning. Yes. Yeah. So you're already supporting the executive function deficit in your children because they don't yet have fully developed executive functions. And when you see the similar behavior in your spouse, I think it would be easy to fall into that.
Totally.
I don't think they need to start parenting, and they definitely start resenting it, and it is a killer for their intimacy. It's like in the tank because nobody wants to be intimate with somebody
for
they're
the women in there.
Well, for both of them.
Yeah, for both. Yeah, because no one wants to feel like they're being parented. That's
definitely an intimacy killer. So, but it's when it's the alternative gendered version. So when it is the woman who has ADHD and her partner does not have ADHD, her husband or partner doesn't have ADHD, it's less common that I hear about overfunctioning in terms of organization. Because even if the woman has ADHD, normally she is still responsible for the executive functioning of the kids. And so
the nurturing part, or is it
and the organizing and the making sure they're going to their lessons and their schedules and they've got their lunches and the doctor's appointments. That even if the woman has ADHD, that doesn't seem to get it doesn't seem to matter. And then she feels like a failure as a parent. But because I think she's still the one doing it, she's not getting parented by her husband. I don't hear that as much. What I sometimes hear is husbands are very critical, or they're very controlling and irritable, So they either just take over or they check out.
Mm.
And so
I can see that.
Yeah. Because they don't know how to help.
They check out, or they go off and do more other activities that are outside the house, so they're not having to be there, and different than golf or.
And they may be supporting the kids. Like, it's not like they're not trying to be parents, so they may be, you know, very involved in their kids' sports or something like that. And they just don't understand why their wives can't get it together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
So it's frustrating, kind of no matter which route it's taken, it's still ways. Frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And I guess that's the part that makes the relationship harder. It's fun at the beginning because they're spontaneous, you're impulsive, you're, you know, many things, you've tried many things, or you want to experience many things. And then, you know, once you start maybe living together and married and things like that, then you start to run into more of these things over long term. And it doesn't seem like anything is like major big red flags, but over time it just sort of adds up.
Death by a thousand cuts.
Death by a thousand cuts. Yeah, and we talk about that in the course, where the person with ADHD is often receiving comments or statements like, well, why can't you just get a calendar, or why can't you just try a little bit harder, why can't you just focus a little bit longer, and all those, and not any one of those is really major shaming, like really coming down on somebody. But over time, then you pick up on it, you hear it for yourself, and then you start repeating those words back to yourself. And I feel like that's kind of the slow burn, the, what do you call that, with the putting the frog in the pot and, you know, slowly boiling the water, the frog gets foiled. Yeah. But if you do it sharply, then they jump out. And so, so I think that's kind of the hard part. It's the long piece that.
Yeah, that is the hard part. By the time I meet people, they've often been together a little while. Like, I don't normally have somebody coming to me when the relationship's new, because they are in the exciting part. They're, you know, in any relationship, when it's new, you've got that honeymoon kind of feeling and that exciting part that can last a couple of years, actually. But after that, particularly if they have children, it's not so fun for any couple. But then if there's ADHD, then those minor annoyances, or major ones, like if you're overspending, for example, those are going to show up in a big way. And people have varying ways of coping. You know, I know for myself, with my ADHD, a parent with ADHD, I probably could have been taught some coping skills early on that I was not taught.
Right.
And that affected how I was in my adult relationships. And, you know, things didn't always go so well.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I meet people, they've been in this long slide. They're several years into a relationship. If it's the man who has ADHD who's coming to me, he's either coming because he's kind of got one foot out the door and he's just like, maybe one more try, yeah. Or his wife usually has asked him to come. Might be an ultimatum, or might be a request, something like that. If it's a woman who has ADHD who's coming, she's feeling like a complete failure as a mother and a wife usually. And she may even be on stress leave from work. Like, they're usually in a very bad place by the time they come to me, which is actually kind of tragic, because it's much harder to support them at this point. I really wish I could meet them earlier in the slide. Yes. Yeah, we always talk about that. Like, prevention is so much easier.
Yeah, prevention's easier than catching it later.
And even if the person's not diagnosed, like if they come to our course, for example, they don't necessarily have a diagnosis. I wish we could have seen them sooner. You know, but I guess if you don't
I think that's the thing with the frog, right?
Yeah.
Right. So not until you get really, really warm, then you're like, hey, maybe I should do something about this.
I think there's lots of barriers, though. There's lots of barriers
like what? Like what's the barrier
getting help.
Early?
Well, yeah, it costs money.
But it costs money later as well.
Does, for sure. But it's in the priority of spending, and it doesn't feel as urgent, maybe. Though I always say, you know, if one person says we should go to couples counseling, you got to go right then.
That should be the time.
Because they've been thinking about it for a long time. So by the time it comes out of their mouth, like, it's already pretty bad. So you should never wait. Just pro tip, don't wait. Mm-hmm. But so I think money is an issue. I think people are always, our modern life is very busy, not just ours, like the Western culture's life is very busy. And it just keeps getting busier, it seems like. The expectations on adults for their working lives, it's all blending into their home lives. And for parents, I just think there's a lot. So the thought of taking out several hours, to work on yourself feels self-indulgent.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree with that, but I think there is that perception. And maybe people don't think it'll work. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I do know from my own experience when I had my son and he was maybe 1 year old, close to 2 years old, my wife at the time, and she had suggested, I think you should go to the parenting course with me. And so she was already going to go and signed up, which was great. And then, so I did go. But what I found interesting was that the first week or so was about, you could tell the person teaching it, and she was, an ex-psychologist. And so she was trying to teach it in a way that was like, there's going to be stuff about your kid, but I know that almost every one of you have come here to say or ask me questions about what can I do to fix my child? And what I'm going to tell you is that you need to fix what's going on for you, and your child will automatically follow. And so I feel like that's maybe something not necessarily that, I was going to say you could do that in your relationship, not to say that every partner is going to follow you, but it would be better if you were to do it anyways for you. And if that wasn't the relationship that was meant to be, you'd be much better prepared for another one. Yeah,
any investment we make in ourselves is going to, in terms of psychotherapy or coaching or skills development, is going to help in all our relationships. But if you're in a relationship that is based on a dynamic that kind of exists on one person being less functional in one way or another, and you become more functional, then the person who needs you to be under their thumb, their needs aren't going to be met. And so they're probably going to leave. Yeah. But it may not be that they're like horrible and controlling. I don't want to make people, the overfunctioning partner isn't bad. That's just how they are, just how they naturally cope. And so, that's why I always focus on improving the skills of the person with ADHD, even if they're coming to me because their spouse has said they have to come. And so it seems like it's the spouse who wants this to happen.
Sure.
The spouse, I think, is recognizing that you can't control somebody else. You can't make somebody else do what you want them to do. They have to want to do it. And so when I meet the person with ADHD, I'm just like, you have to decide if you want to make changes for yourself. If you want to invest time and effort into yourself and improving your skills, do that. But don't do it for your spouse.
I just know that that's tough because, that's how it started with me, but I knew kind of right away that I wanted to learn more because I never grew up being taught how to be a father. And I suspect when I talk to other fathers that they probably feel the same way. And I think mothers or moms may fall into that role easier only because maybe they've been taught a little bit more about nurturing, how to nurture and how to care for somebody else. And it's not as common, I think, for me and the fathers that I talk to. And so, I think just jump on it and do it for yourself, for sure, but knowing that there'll be other positive repercussions from doing it.
Usually, but not, a positive repercussion might be this relationship that isn't good for either of you ends.
But that's positive because it means that you've grown past that relationship. And
ultimately, but let's not pretend that wouldn't be disruptive for people's lives.
Totally. Yeah. Your definition of positive.
Yours. You're the one who said it was, yes.
Might be different than
ultimately, yours. Divorce can be positive, but it sure doesn't feel like it at the time.
No, at the time. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So ADHD, so there's a lot of things that go along with ADHD that we've talked a little bit about around relationships and stuff, but when we have them in our program, there's sort of a ebb and flow in the program, right? There's like some excitement at the beginning, and excitement sometimes mixed with, I was going to say fear. I talked to somebody today and they were like, I want to go to the program, but I know that this is going to bring up stuff for me. So I'm like worried about what it's going to bring up and how I'm going to feel about that. So there's kind of that maybe apprehension, but there's some excitement at the beginning. And then I think it's like a few weeks in, and then they start to realize like, oh, there's some hard things here, right? And we never say that any of this is going to be easy. But they go through some hard stuff, but then it's usually that curve comes back around again, and then like, okay, they start to feel like I'm getting some skills out of this, and that last time I tried it, it worked, and and then it starts to build, and not they're not going to do it perfect every time, but that's not the point. It's just that they're starting to do things better.
I think they see there may be a path for them to do things a little bit differently in their relationships, and they hear, just because of the way we do our courses, they hear from other people who are learning the same skills along with them and trying them out in their own lives, with their kids, with their spouses, whoever it might even be. Maybe they're single and they're just practicing with family members and friends, whatever. It is difficult, and some people want therapy, like they really want therapy, and they should get therapy, and we encourage that. And some people want skills. And so we're happy to provide skills, but I think what you're saying, and I agree, for most people, if you need therapy, you can't just learn skills, because the need for therapy will start to assert itself. And then it interferes with the ability to learn the skills. If there's unprocessed trauma, or if there's, fear of abandonment, or whatever it is that's coming up. For most of us have had things happen in our lives that we could probably benefit from working through. And
I think both are important.
Well, exactly. But I guess what I'm saying is, it's like, if you think you need therapy, do that. But if you don't have access to somebody who knows about ADHD, which we hear quite a lot, still do therapy, but don't think that they can help you with ADHD, because if they don't know about ADHD, you might not feel like they get you. Certainly, I've had that.
We hear that a lot. I hear that a lot.
I hear that a lot too.
And not to blame the therapist.
No, gosh, no.
Because usually at that point, the person's usually the patient or the client's usually asking questions around their ADHD and my executive function, and they're starting to be a little bit more savvy at that point usually. And so now they're asking questions of the therapist that they don't really have those answers for, which is fine. But then that might be the trigger to say, like, oh, I need to maybe find some other resources or training or something like that to pull in those skills, because that's what really I'm asking for.
Well,
whereas therapy also has its value,
absolutely.
but it's more meant for the emotional stuff.
Grounding exercises and self-regulation skills in terms of just in the moment, how to calm your body and how to soothe yourself, absolutely. And if you have a history of trauma, processing the trauma with your therapist and understanding the arc of your life and how your childhood experiences are interfering with your now relationships. We had an argument just the other day that something from my childhood was at play, and we both knew it, but knowing it doesn't matter, it's still at play. And I think you have to understand those things so that you can be aware of what you bring into each moment that is separate from the ADHD. Like, it's different.
Yeah, and knowing it was helpful, because I was able to recognize it and not continuing to walk over that past trauma, or and so it wasn't making things worse. But we still had to go through it.
You do. When one person, and so I should say, people with ADHD often have these tender spots because they have grown up in an environment where their needs might not have been fully met, either because a parent was unskilled, a parent has ADHD themselves, or having ADHD makes you harder to parent. And so you're more likely to have those missteps with the parent. The parent might be more rejecting because the child is actually more difficult. And so I think there is a higher likelihood that you will have, if not big T trauma, little t trauma. And so you'll have more tender spots. And I hear a lot about, like when I look on the internet, about rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And so I absolutely agree that emotional dysregulation is, even though it's not necessarily in the diagnostic criteria, it is a problem for almost everyone with ADHD. Whereas rejection sensitivity dysphoria, to me, is actually part of those early childhood trauma injuries. Because I meet lots of people with ADHD who don't have that.
Right.
They might have tender spots, but they don't have that. So that doesn't feel like a fundamental thing. But I know for lots of people it's there.
and you can have the tender spots without having ADHD.
Of course.
Right. So, yeah. So you're just trying to kind of rule in, rule out things that are truly, really ADHD, and some other things that are usually around, close by, but not necessarily.
Well, because I think that helps people feel a little bit more. They can understand what's going on for them a little bit more. Because if I say, if they come to me and they say I have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and I agree that that's actually their biggest problem, we're probably not going down an ADHD path.
Right.
We're going down a trauma path, and the dysregulated emotions is their biggest problem. So that actually has to be addressed first. You know, if they are 0 to 100 in 60 seconds and they're just like spewing out abuse, that will damage all their relationships. Maybe the ADHD is making them more impulsive and they're more likely to do it, but it's not the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Lots of people with ADHD do not do that.
Yeah. What I like about what you do as a psychologist is you're looking to provide clarity. Like you talk about ruling in, ruling out, but really for me as a non-psychologist, it seems more like it's, you know, you're trying to provide clarity for the person. And so when you use these words about ADHD and sensitivity disorder and all that, it's more about how do we provide clarity so that we know how to, so the client knows what to maybe look up and start to understand better, and so that they can be more educated and, you know,
and what treatment to choose.
What treatment to choose, yeah. And so I think it's okay to kind of talk about it in that context without trying to use it as a label. I know the whole labeling thing, and people are anti-label, but yeah, I think it's important to look at it from a maybe more of a scientific point of view. Like, okay, this is going on for me because it's this, and this is going on for me because it's that. And if it just blurred everything together and I just accept myself for who I am, then I think it's harder for them to maybe overcome or learn about ways to deal with that better. And we don't have to get into the whole diagnostic thing, but
no. What I was going to say was just one piece there that lots of people might have heard you say, and I also did, and I had a little reaction. I think we can accept ourselves how we are and still want to change.
Totally. Yeah. So I don't want to just accepting yourself is very important. Yeah.
But I think if we use whatever's going on for us, a label or whatever, as an excuse, which maybe is what you were saying, that's not helpful, because it's like, well, I have ADHD, or I have all these tender spots, and you have to be careful about all those, and you have to know about them. And so now you're walking on eggshells around me, or you're not asking me to do any tasks around the house. I mean, how long is that relationship going to last? So,
and that could be with friends, and it could be with family as well. Yeah.
So it's not an excuse, but it is an explanation. Whatever it is, whether or not you have ADHD or something else. But ADHD particularly has some pretty characteristic curveballs, let's say, it throws into a relationship that some are obvious, like we talked about at the beginning, but I think some are more subtle. Like, I don't know what it's like for you, but I interrupt Tom a lot. And I think it's a little bit irritating, but he's a champ about it.
Yeah, it's not something I have to, it's just something I know.
Yeah,
I understand, and sometimes I don't understand why we have to, be interrupted around whatever subject it was, but other times I'm good with it. So,
yeah, no, it's great, because it's I'm not even aware of it most of the time.
I can tell.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you're not changing the subject because I can't see it on your face. You're not reacting to like, oh, I'm changing the subject, and here he goes, he's going to react to me doing it. And so you're just happily talking about something else. And it's usually not something completely different. There's usually tangents and, connectivity between the topics, but then I like to look at trying to bring you back, and especially if it's a topic I want to continue.
That's been one of my skills, and yours, is to, when you bring me back, to thank you and to let go of wherever I was. Because
for you to do that.
Yep. Yeah. Because if I resist the bringing back, then it is now an irritating interruption. You weren't able to finish the first conversation. And so that would be an example of a kind of skill that we have, that we share, right, with clients with ADHD, because interrupting is going to happen, or losing your train of thought, or having a hard time making your point. Those are pretty typical comments that we hear from the people in our courses, though they're not going to read about that in a book necessarily, but it is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that part, that's the piece that I always feel like the stuff on social media talks about only surface level stuff about ADHD, all the easy, quick grabs of things, or something that's a quick soundbite or something. But that's why I keep telling to people when they come in, it's like ADHD is complicated.
Yeah, there's an undercurrent that affects all kinds of things in your life that you might not realize.
Yeah. And so, when I do talk to them, just to kind of turn this around, it's like, there's that you said that undercurrent of other things that are happening that are harder to see, and maybe they're easier to see after a long period of time of being with them, and you're like, oh my God, that's so annoying and that's so frustrating for me. But I feel like, after we talk to people quite a bit and put them through the program or something, I do see them uplifting, like that curve again. When I talk about, the down part, they do come up and out. Mm-hmm. And so I do feel that it's hopeful that there are changes that are possible, there are improvements that are possible, and I want people to feel that they may have tried it on their own and they may have felt hopeless, or that they've tried it all and it just didn't work. But I'm here to say that there are things that can be done to help things improve. And so maybe just haven't found the right things, or doing it on your own is like crucially, it's so hard. And so just having somebody else to kind of guide you through that, I think a knowledgeable coach who knows about ADHD, but also other people who've been there, done that. Mm-hmm. I also really like that the way our kind of the community is structured is that people come and go. I really like that. And so they might take a course here and then maybe they take another course there, but then we might see them again in one of those courses, because I think it's sort of kind of like that thing about maybe you need therapy. They might take our course, stuff comes up,
learn a little bit of stuff comes up, they might go away, work on that a little bit, and then they come back and they're in a different position. And how many times have we seen that when people have come back 3 or 4 times and we're like, oh, this is a new you. Now they get it.
This is a new you,
And that's really exciting, because they get the piece they need, the therapeutic piece they need from their therapist, wherever they are, but they get the specific skill building piece from people who really get it and live it, obviously.
I like what we do.
I love what we do. It's fun. But it's also, I think it's just really nice for them, because they can be like, hey, the first time I did this, I really was excited, but I couldn't build it in. Whether it be the time management course, they're so overwhelmed that they literally tell us they don't have time to do it, which is, the irony kills me.
Yes.
But
I don't have time to do a program that can help me have more time in my life.
Yeah. It's heartbreaking. But anyway, they say that. We can't make it that up. They say that. Yeah. But they go away and they have the skills, right? We give them, they can check it out whenever they want. And I think they come back and they're like, okay, the first time I was like, didn't even get through. I couldn't even finish all the units. Like, I came because they love the live calls and they come to those. But then the second time they do it, they're like, okay, now I want to talk about this one, because I think I got those. And and that's nice, because going back to the life being busy, I also think that's a barrier, right? Like, I know for me, if I sign up for a course, like, I want to get the most out of it. And I want it to be worth my while.
Most of them do.
That's my personality too, right? I don't want to waste my money. And so I might be worried that I just can't commit to it. And so that might stop me.
Or you're going to fear falling behind, or get overwhelmed with too much stuff. Yeah.
And so I don't meet them. Like, you're the one that brings them in. And so you must help them with that, because it happens inevitably. They start the course and then they do tend to get overwhelmed, but they don't leave. They stay with us.
That's that curve, segment, and then the dip, and then you pull it out at the end.
And then we invite them back. They know they can come back, and it's easy for them to come back, like in terms of scheduling, but also financially. Like, we make it so easy for them to come back, and I think that's like a promise we make to them, that it's just like, we're a place for you, even if you only got 20 or 30% of what we offer. We're here next time, and
we're here for you.
I like that. Yeah, I like that, because we joke that I'm a more is more psychologist.
More is not always more.
I know. I want to teach people everything on the first day, and I have to not do that because they get overwhelmed.
Yeah. I'm going to give you, as a present, maybe a fire hose.
Yeah.
Have you heard that one before? Taking everything by fire hose?
Well, I've had a job that was like drinking from a fire hose, and so I don't want to do that. But I sometimes do anyway.
Yeah, that's okay. You're good at what you do, and then I'm good at like kind of holding it back a bit so it's workable. So yeah, good partnership. All right, so another good conversation about relationships. I'm getting smoking hot from this fire. Like, I know you like heat, but I am just about sweating. But yeah, we will do this again if there's people who want to see this again. And so,
it might not be a literal fireside chat though if it's too hot.
Yeah, but yeah, like us, let us know. We're happy to talk about a lot more stuff.
Let us know if you want more of these, because this is a different thing for us.
Yeah, the impulsive, Claire making me sit down and just talk about stuff.
So if you reach this end of the video,
thank you, and good on you. Yeah.
And do let us know. You're like, more fireside chats or no more of those.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right, everyone.
Bye, folks.
Thanks.